So we're coming up to the end of the course now, and I'd like to sort of just use this time to go through some troubleshooting things. So sort of some frequently asked questions, some common problems, and how we deal with them. So this footage you'll know because we've taken it from a previous exercise. So I just want to show you. A little issue we can have if we haven't got our frame offset set up consistently between Mocha Pro and our compositing app. What I'm going to do is where's my sine track? There we go. Is take my sine track, export out the tracking data to Nuke corner pin, just copy that to the clipboard and come into Nuke. And this is how we had it set up before. So all I'm going to do is have my checkerboard selected, paste that information in there, and let's play it through. So we can see something's not quite right here. We've got the general movement going around, so it should be working perfectly, but it isn't. Now, it's a fairly simple one to diagnose. So I'm going to come to my corner pin node here. Let's just come and check out the curve editor. So if we have a look, I've got my information pasted in here, but it's starting at frame 10. Now, why is it starting at frame 10 instead of frame 1? Well, let's go back into Mocha and have a look. We come and have a look in our clip over here, and we come to our settings, check out our frame offset. So this is where the frame offset is really important. So let's set that to 1 now, and just re-export our track. Copy that to the clipboard. Come back to my node editor and just delete that there. Paste that new one back in. Apple V, Control V, and now it's sitting exactly where it's meant to. And that's just a simple case of the frame offset. Now in After Effects, let's do the same thing again here in After Effects. Let's back in Mocha Pro, export out that tracking data to After Effects corner pin, supports motion blur, do that one, copy that to the clipboard, come into After Effects. Now After Effects actually doesn't really care about the frame offset. So yeah, all After Effects really cares about is what frame you're at when you paste the information in there. So here we're at frame 20, so that's where it's pasted the keyframe information in. If we were at frame 0, as we are here, so the first frame, and paste that in with Apple V, Control V, then everything goes in absolutely fine. But you can get the same problem happening in pretty much most of the exports if you don't have the frame offset matched up correctly. So if you're a frame out or your track looks perfect in Mocha, doesn't when you bring it into the compositor, then that could easily be the problem there. Now another problem we could find is with pixel aspect ratios. So if we're dealing with non-square pixels. Now the problem comes here is that it's not simply a case of coming into our clip and then changing our aspect ratio here. Depending on your footage, we actually might have to you might have to retrack everything. So it's vitally important, especially when you're working with the SD stuff, is that you get that correct. Because let's just have a look what happens when we change the aspect ratio here. It's trying to recalculate our tracking data, which it's given a fair crack of the whip of it, but it's not able to get that looking the way it should do, because obviously all the calculations it's done up till now has been working on a particular pixel aspect ratio. So we will have to go in, and if you've made that mistake, you will have to sort of go in and retrack your footage and basically start again. So when you're importing, let's save that there, and let's just import a clip here. Any clip, it really doesn't matter. Yeah, so when you're importing stuff, the most important things to check, because you can't go back on this afterwards, is the pixel aspect ratio. Make sure you have that set correctly, and be aware of the difference between CS4 PAL. Remember that the regular SD formats here are really specific for non-Adobe applications or CS3 and below Adobe applications, and then the CS4 ones are the ones with the let's say, well, the correct pixel aspect ratio going on there. Same goes for your non-square HD formats, so your DVC Pros and your HDVs. And the other thing that you can't change once you have once you've imported the clip and said OK is the fields. So if you've got footage that's interlaced, make sure you put interlacing on here. It doesn't actually matter at the import stage whether you've got upper field or lower field first, because this can always be changed. But if you have interlaced footage and you have your separate fields set to off, you can't go back later and set that to on again. So that's just a little thing, but worth noting, I think. All right, so the next common question that I get asked is about I'm just going to create another shape for this just to show you what's going on. Yeah, so the next question that I get asked quite a bit is, when should you use perspective in the motion tracking? Now, I have answered that in a previous exercise, but I think it's worth bringing this point home quite strongly. Now, perspective is really good when you have a flat surface like this one here that is going to be either foreshortening here, or sort of moving out in this direction, or doing this sort of move here where it's foreshortening in a different way. So shear, let's draw this up here. So shear is good for objects that are sort of moving and distorting in this kind of way. That's all nice, good fun in the shear. But perspective is going to be really good when objects are moving a bit like that. So going from something square to foreshortening at one side, or the other side like that. Or in this case, let's delete this one here. Or in this case, moving as this sign moves here. So you can see that is a classic case for turning perspective on. Now, related to that, the other question I get asked is, when should you use smoothing levels? And my answer to that is really, if you have some fairly noisy footage and you can see that there's lots of small movements happening in your points as it tracks through, just bring the smoothing level up a small amount there until you can see that the points of your track are actually matching up a lot better. And the last one related to tracking, let's actually track this forwards a little bit here. Okay, this actually might be too good a track to, there we go. Yeah, that's really annoying. It's actually, by default, that's become too good a track to prove my point. But what I want to show you is if we have a couple of really bad, dodgy frames going on, let's just pretend that at some point in here that we have a couple of dodgy keyframes that we want to get rid of. Now, even if we've keyframed the shape here, these keyframes that we have on the shape, let's do that there. Yeah, so if we've got keyframes on the shape here, these keyframes actually don't change anything to do with the main tracking data. So there's a separation between the shapes that we've got and we've keyframed here and the tracking data. So we can change the shape here independently of the tracking data to then go and retrack it. But what if we've just got a couple of weird keyframes and the rest of it looks absolutely fine? Well, the way to check that out is to come into the curve editor over here, and let's give this a name here. Let's call this our troubleshoot. So let's open up our troubleshoot here. just open this up a little bit further. And you can see here in our curve editor, we have a track parameter. And I'll turn the eye on that. Then click on frame all here. And it's in the curve editor that we can see if we have any sort of weird out of place leaps within our track. Yeah, so we've got a little jump here that's happening in our curve. Yeah, so we have a little jump in our curve here that we don't see reflected in the footage here. What we can do is just select those keyframes where the jump's happening. It's usually only one or two, generally actually only one. But we can take those and then just delete them. And then we get our nice smooth curve going back again. So that's one way of fixing any sort of big visible bump in our track without having to go through and retrack everything again. I mean, I actually can't emphasize enough how important it is that that our base track is as good as it possibly can get before we start to do anything else. Because having a good base track is so much better than having a half good base track and then trying to use the adjust track to get everything perfect, because you're going to have to work a lot harder in the adjust track module than you would do if you just retracked everything and had that looking a lot better, or made sure that track was perfect from that time. Now that also leads me on to another thing that I actually haven't explored that much in this particular course, but I have in other courses. And that's all about the separation between tracking shapes and roto shapes. You'll notice that with pretty much all of the layers that I've created throughout this entire course, I've added the word track to them at the end. Now, the reason for that, if I'm doing rotoscoping and wanting to take out the shape data, I actually prefer to have a separate layer where the shape data is, rather than sort of relying on our track data here. Because, as we saw when we were doing the remove stuff, we were able to track a shape through, and then once the track was done, we were able to then go in and adjust that, and it would hold the track. But my preferred way of working, if I'm doing rotor splines to take out to other applications, and let's just start doing this. Let's actually do one based on this sign. Let's just come in. I'm going to be a bit loose on this, but that's fine. There we go. That's good enough for now. Let's turn my mat on. So we saw when we were doing the remove that we're able to take this, let's call this sign mask, and we were able to link one layer, so link our sign mask to a different track. So link that to our troubleshoot track, and then that takes on the tracking data, but still leaves us the ability to come in here and simply play around with any keyframing we have to do in this shape. In this particular case, I wouldn't have thought that we'd have to do much keyframing, but it's vitally important when we come to doing larger rotoscoping projects in here, that we can link several different layers just to one main base track. So that wasn't really a sort of troubleshooting exercise. That was just more a little feature that I don't think I explored enough. Now the next thing that I want to have a look at is motion blur over here. So again, this is actually more related to our rotoscoping and shape creation than it is to the tracking. But if I turn my motion blur on here, we can get to see how this is going to look with motion blur. So that's just how it was in the insert tab when we turned motion blur on here, but it relates to us taking out shape data into other applications, into our compositing applications. Let's just set our in and out points here quickly so we can just get a quick look at that and just bounce through that range. we can't actually see that in this view here. We need to go and have a look for the appropriate mat. We can then see, hang on a second, let's just turn that on there. We can then see the motion blur turning on there. So let's look at that there. Just play that through. So you can see our motion blur happening there at that point, rather than when we're looking at, stop that there. Yeah, rather than when we're looking at our main sign here. So we'll turn mats off there. That there, we can see that happening, and turn the angle all the way up as well. So this will really give us some extreme motion blur. There we go. So yeah, so the angle is the sort of distance of the motion blur up to a maximum of 360, and the quality is how many samples it's taking. So if we take the regular sort of 0.1 there, see if we can actually see the difference in this one. We probably won't be able to see the difference in this because, oh no, here we go, we might be able to see it here. There we go. So that was taking a look at the motion blur. The final one that I want to look at is the edge width here under the edge properties, and this is something else that let's turn this back on over here, turn our mats back on, and let's turn off troubleshooting there. Okay, so we had a look at how we could individually draw out the edges to soften things up when we looked at the remove. We did that using the move edge points here, but we can also set an edge width up here as well. So I hit set, and that sets an edge width in there. I can change this at any point, open that up, and that gives me a slightly larger blur. I can also add edge width. But let's see what happens when I try to take away edge width there. So minus edge width. There we go, we can also take away edge width. But this can all be keyframed. So we can come in and we can actually keyframe our edge width from, where would that be now, sort of 0 to 8.3 to 25.4. And we could even erode, so we have a negative edge width, we can erode that there as well. But one of the problems obviously comes with the fact that the edge width here sets it across the entire spline. If we want to change any of that and sort of really get proper access to the keyframes on it, we need to pop back into the curve editor here, and under the spline, each of the individual control points have different edge widths here. So we can turn the eye onto our points here and just check those out. Let's frame all of those so we can see what's going on. So these keyframes down here in the curve editor match up to the keyframes in the timeline here. So the edge width keyframes are actually built into the individual control points here. So really, if you want to get rid of control points, or sorry, get rid of edge width across the entire range, there we go. The curve editor is the way to do it. If we just try to get rid of the, there we go. We just try to get rid of the keyframes on here. So I have all my shapes selected. Come over to the delete all keyframes. It will actually ask me if I want to delete all shape keyframes. If I hit yes there, any other keyframe that I've made is going to get deleted. So the best thing is when you're dealing with edge width and you just want to smooth out everything across the entire shape, is to again remember to turn our Uber key on instead of animating that, because you can end up just chasing your own tail, figuring out why at certain parts the shape is sort of eating into itself and looking really weird. But that could be one of the reasons, is that you've got a keyframed edge width eating into your shape and making everything look a little bit strange. So there's no reason why you shouldn't keyframe the edge width. It's just, if you're going to do it, make sure that you know that you're doing it. Don't just be going in experimenting with the edge properties over here without realizing that you are setting keyframes across your entire shape here. Right, well, that is I think all I'm going to talk about for now. I hope you got a lot out of this course about, you know, how to start getting started with Mocha Pro, and some of the basic functionality and the not so basic functionality, and a few certain techniques that you can use to, you know, avoid a lot of trouble. You can always get in contact with me and send me feedback at curiousturtle.com, and I do read all of your emails, and I try to answer them all as well. Great, well, my name's Ben Brownlee, and for now, goodbye.